Just as a heads up, we're not quite there. Okay, we're getting settled.
So the more raggedy hats that show up, the better.
Okay, I think, yep. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Looks like everybody is getting settled. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of October 18th, 2023 to order. It is 1:30 p.m. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Vice Chair, would you like to lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Laura, would you like to move forward with roll call?
Leon Garcia,
Here.
Mark Joseph,
Here.
Donald Williams,
Present.
Kevin Eisenberg,
Here.
Liz Alessio,
Present.
Alfredo Pedroza, Ryan Gregory,
Here.
Paul Doring,
Here.
Anna Shuto, Eric Knight,
Here.
and we have confirmed absences today from Director Sedgley and Director Mueller. We do have a quorum.
And I see that we have Director Pedrosa just arrived, so we can add him. Laura, was there any consideration and approval of the board member request to be remote participation, or is everybody in person?
There are none today.
Thank you very much. Item 5 is the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? And if not, is there a motion or a second to adopt the agenda?
Second.
Yes, this is a tax agency. Absolutely, yes. This
Move
is it.
adoption.
Okay, we have a Director Knight has
Director
made a
Knight, thank
motion.
you.
Second, Jason.
Second by Joseph, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. This is our opportunity for public comment. And again, this is the NVTA-TA tax agency. Do we have any public comment? Any online? No. Okay, thank you. Item 7 is the chairpersons and board members update. Do we have any updates from our chair, or I don't have an update. Anybody on the tax authority? Not seeing any. Okay, moving on to 8.1, which is public hearings. This is a public hearing presented by Antonio Honorado. This is an action item. So Antonio, I'll let you begin.
Chair, will I pull up the presentation where you officially opened the public hearing?
I'm sorry, say that one more
Will you
time.
officially open the public hearing while I
Yes,
open the
yes.
presentation?
I'll officially open the public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Chair Alicia and members of the board. My name is Antonio Honorado, and I am the finance director here at NVTA. So for this item, staff is asking the board to approve resolution number 23-02-TA, which is attachment number 1, for the fiscal year 2023 annual operating budget and associated annual appropriation limit currently at $24,876,000 and for an increase of up to $26 million. So why are we doing this? So basically, this is all about accounting. The budget was approved and the spending authority for Measure T funds back in 2021 because it's a 2-year biannual budget. And Measure T funds revenues come in as revenue, but they leave the agency as expenditures. Now, this is where the problem lies. As you can see from the PowerPoint presentation here, we had our current budget is $24,876,000, but Measure T revenues came in a little bit better than that at about $25,551,000. So basically, we received and posted the revenues to the accounting general ledger, but we're not able to post the other side of the general ledger, the expenditure side, because we hit our appropriation authority at the time. But be rest assured that the last disbursements to the jurisdictions for Measure T revenues were transmitted to the jurisdictions back on September the 8th. We just now have to post the entries to the accounting general ledger for the final disbursement for the year. So because we need the legal authority to do so. I've asked for a budget increase of $26 million just in case there are any adjustments that may need to be posted as a result of the financial audit, which we're undertaking right now. There's nothing to indicate that this will happen, but it's nice to have a little bit of a cushion just in case. So just to recap, staff is asking the board to increase the amount of the of the fiscal year 23 budget for the year ending June 30th, 2023, the fiscal year that just ended, to $26 million to properly account for the annual Measure T revenue. That concludes my report. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So in essence, this is good news. We received more money than anticipated.
Mhm.
And you're also projecting some flexibility in case there's a little bit more expenditure.
In case there's some additional revenues or in case there's an adjustment, but by all indications, that's not going to happen. But I just want that little bit of a gap just to be sure.
That sounds good. Do we have any questions? Yes, Director Knight.
Thank you, Chair Alicia. Could you, thank you, Mr. Honorable, for the report. Could you send us a copy of this slide to the board? I didn't see it here, but I'd appreciate a copy of it.
Absolutely. And at the next TA board, I will give you a rundown of the Measure T revenues and the disbursements on a jurisdictional basis as well. So
Thank you. Thank you for your report.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Do we have any public comment? Not in the room. How about online?
Seeing none online.
Okay. Do we need to close public comment or can I go ahead and move forward for a motion?
You may move forward with the motion.
Okay. Do we have a motion on this item? Moved by Pedrosa,
Second, Joseph.
second by Joseph. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, we have on our TA agenda is the consent item. There's just one consent item, and those are the meeting minutes of September 27th, 2023. Does anybody have any changes or does somebody want to make a motion to adopt?
Move to approve, Garcia.
Thank you.
Second, Joseph.
Thank you. So moved by Garcia, second by Garcia. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. There are no regular items on the agenda. Are there any future agenda items requested for the TA? Not seeing any. Very good. We'll adjourn this meeting at 1:37. The next regular meeting for the tax authority is November 15th, 2023. Okay, moving on to our regular meeting for NVTA, again, October 18th. And we're at 1:38 p.m. as we begin. We've already met roll call. We know that we have no requests for remote participation. So do we have an adoption of the agenda? Are there any changes to this agenda? And if not, do we have a motion to approve? Moved by Chateau,
Second, Joseph.
second by Joseph. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. On number 5 is public comment. Are there any public comments for this regular agenda? Not seeing any or online. Very good. And on number 6, we have chairpersons, board members, MTC, and ABAG update. I have no updates. Do we have a MTC update?
I do, Chair Alessio. So it might be a little long today, but let me just start off with, you've heard me all talk about regional network management. We did appoint the council that will be overseeing some of the initiatives that we're trying to embark on MTC, which is fare integration, schedule coordination. So that's underway. There's 5 transit agencies and representatives from big and small operators. Melanie Troy, longtime MTC staff person, has been selected to head this initiative, which is a really big undertaking. And if many of you see my social media posts, I've been spending a lot of time in San Jose, especially writing BART. And part of what we're trying to do is our colleagues in San Jose have a pretty bold initiative of extending BART to San Jose. It's something, while it is an expensive endeavor, we need to look at it through the eyes of whether it's not going to make economic sense to make that investment at this moment in time. But the fact is you're making an investment for the future. similar to a lot of our projects. And that's a very critical project to connect our region, to connect the Bay Area. It's a project that's been in the works for multiple years. And while it's expensive with a capital B and billions, it's going to provide us an opportunity to move within our region. And as we also try to meet our climate action goals, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, public transit is going to be a critical element of that movement. So we've been working with Mayor Mahan and also MTC Commissioner Chavez on how do we make sure that there's support for these initiatives. But what we're also looking at is there's a responsibility among local municipalities of also upzoning along transit corridors. And that's something we're working with them. It's a little bit different for our community because we don't have, high-speed rail or those type of rail systems. I think the closest thing we have is American Canyon, which has some PDAs in there in terms of, some transit-oriented development. So that's a little bit on the transportation side. On the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, have also been spending a lot of time in that space of MTC ABAG. Mayor Garcia can probably talk more about that. But we did meet with the Bay Area Council in terms of, and they're a business servicing group in the Bay Area, to talk about a potential housing measure in 2024 in terms of protection, preservation, and production. And there is a return to source component on that. It is going to be a regional measure. And I'll tell you, one of the exciting parts about this is an ability to create and pull our funds together. New York has done this through a housing authority. And essentially, when we go do these housing programs, the banks will come in, create interest income, and they make money. Part of the opportunity for the authority is to act as the bank, where we provide loans. You create a self-sustaining funding stream that allows us to reinvest in more affordable housing. I think the closest thing we have locally is the workforce proximity housing program that Supervisor Gregory knows about, where we become a silent second, and then you take some equity percent and it creates a fund. That's what we're trying to do with this regional fund and bond. It's really important that hopefully we can all be supportive at the right time. We're having conversations. If you were at NICLOG, you heard Kate Hartley come and present around this. It's an incredible time. And if we are in a housing crisis, then our actions need to match that as well. And I will say this is going to provide us an incredible opportunity to do so. We've also been discussing the fiscal cliff with our transit operators and potentially how does that get solved. The state has been an incredible partner in that. What I will tell you, my interests in looking at the region, we have 27 transit operators. I don't think I've been on all 27 of them, but I've been on most. There might be an opportunity to look at how do we have more efficiencies within the transit operators. In Napa County, we're unique. We have one operator. Some counties have multiple operators. An example, the ferry service is operated by WEDA, but Golden Gate also operates a ferry service. There's discussions, maybe there should be one. As we know, when you try to take control away as local electeds, we all get a little nervous. But if you're thinking about the users, the people that need to ride public transit, they really don't care whether there's 27 transit operators or 12. They care about service, if it's affordable and accessible. Those are the pillars that we're standing on. So it's a lot of attention that we've been spending on MTC, but it's an incredible moment to actually make some meaningful changes for our Bay Area. So happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair, if there's any.
Very good, Arthur. Thank you for that report. Are there any questions for Dr. Berdosa? No. Thank you for your leadership and update. Do we have an ABAG update?
Yes, the next ABAG meeting was coming up in November. We do the odd number of months. But just to remind folks, and to your point, Director Pedrosa, the commuter cares about efficiency, access, affordability, and of course of late, safety. And I understand from feedback we get that BART's making great strides and assuring folks that the equipment is modern and safe. They've increased the number of officers on the BART system, shorter trains. So people complain that's a little more compact than they like, but it's easier for officers to patrol. So assuring safety seems to be a top on that. With respect to ABAG, certainly the final Plan Bay Area 2050 is going forward. Certainly each jurisdiction will have impact on that in terms of affordable housing being there required to build. And that discussion dialogue goes on. I'm certainly all familiar with how that oftentimes works. From this perspective of American Canyon, I think Vice Chair Joseph could probably also chime in on this. We're at On the low income side, we're at 156% of our arena requirement. Hopefully that's good for us for the 8 years of the plan, but we have that opportunity to build it. And I think the likewise with the opportunity is the upside of the economic impact. The local businesses will have more customers. Industry looking for a place to locate is looking for a workforce. We have the housing. So I think that's an opportunity that will be realized as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. It's exciting to see where you are with your arena, all the housing that you're doing and the other initiatives. You guys are doing great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for the update. Are there any? Yes, Director Gregory.
Thank you. The Highway 37 Policy Committee met 2 weeks ago. 2 things to highlight from that meeting for you. First is the tolling discount program. There's still a lot being considered. They're currently evaluating regional income levels and working on means-based discount programs. Certainly have till the project opens to figure it all out, but there will be some public hearings coming up. I know we've all heard from our constituents very interested in this. There will be opportunities, whether it's at the policy committee or at MTC, to weigh in on the equity programs coming around the toll. And the other is pretty exciting for probably any of us that travel to Marin often. Talked a bit about the near-term Highway 37 project, which will be adding a lane in each direction from Vallejo to Sears Point. Along with that is an intersection improvement at 121 and 37. We focused on that improvement. For the first time, I saw a published map that shows what they're thinking through there, which would be an extended left turn lane to get onto 121 from 37. I can't quite tell from the map. It looks like it's thousands of feet. So you'll be able to get on it much sooner, as well as a carpool lane through there that will then join up with 4 lanes going on 37 towards Vallejo. So that's coming as part of this project. Again, they anticipate it going into construction based on getting all the funding put together somewhere between 25 and 27. So it is certainly something coming. Everybody's optimistic about that. So
That's exciting.
again, I left with a lot of hope that we're going to see something.
Yeah,
So-
that's excellent. What is your committee? Is it called the Highway 37 Planning Committee? What is that? What
Highway
is that advisory?
37 Policy Committee,
Policy
right,
Committee?
Kate?
Okay, if it makes sense, I really appreciate the update. You gave an update last time. If we can add that onto the agenda along with the ABAG MTC, we can add the Highway 37
I would
Policy Committee meeting as a standing update. That'd be great.
just make a comment. I think at the last policy committee meeting, I wasn't there, but I don't think they calendared the next meeting. And that might be intentional. There's just a lot of oversight with 37.
Okay.
So I would.
So maybe not.
I think between Supervisor Kirk and I will find a way to make sure that we provide any updates on 37.
Do you recommend that we go ahead and leave that on or add that to our agenda as a standing update or no?
I probably wouldn't.
Okay, never mind, scratch
So
that.
just also a reminder that Grant provides updates about the project as part of
Yes.
his project overview.
Yes.
So,
Okay,
but
so we're good. We get it covered.
It's wonderful to hear Director Gregory's summary and how much he has his head wrapped around a very complicated project. So
Yeah,
well done.
absolutely. And 37 is, even though it's not, directly within our county, there's a direct impact and benefit from it. So it's great to have folks here representing and helping with that. Yes,
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Garcia.
Also with feedback from SR 37. Appreciate Director Ryan Gregory's report on that. A lot of, I think, very helpful information happening. Just to rehash a bit of very briefly, the issue faced. Turns out there's more people going east to west in the morning than are coming east to west to east in the evening. Well, because you get at that SR 121 at the Infineon Raceway, you can see the traffic's not really moving because it's all merging together. So it's 121 to 12 to 29. It comes down through American Canyon. Of late, what I've noticed coming like a meeting like this today, I'll go down and get about South School 29 going south. There's more traffic turning left to go to Fairfield, Rockaville than it is going south. And the issue is commuters and where they live.
Yeah.
And how do you map that? So that's a big of a challenge. I think improving this section between Infineon to Vallejo will do a lot to improve that. The other good event there was it projects more on American Canyon. We're in the process with one of our nonprofit foundation is building an ecology center at the old corporate yard. They had this incredible presentation on the whole wetlands restoration in that area. And it's to my knowledge, having looked for it, if anybody has more to add to that, I think this is going to be the only ecology center in the whole North Bay. And right now, it's right on the wetlands. I mean, the courtyard is sitting right on the edge with a trail that goes, that big trail goes right by the front. The organization, the community, American Canyon Community and Parks Foundation has put together an ecology training center. They take it to local campuses. Right across the street is a middle school. Next to that is an elementary school. About 3-4 blocks away is another elementary school. And they bring little projects around and they have gatherings and it gives them information about wildlife study, what wetlands means, what the climate change is going to impact. So I think this is going to be a tremendous asset. And I was very appreciative of, I think that was the Climate Conservatory that did the presentation. Very, very academic, but very, very helpful.
Thank you. There any other updates? Okay, not seeing any. Do we have an executive director update?
Yes, I hit the wrong button. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I have, we have a new staff member that some of you might recognize, Patrick Band. Can you stand up, Patrick?
Hey,
Yeah.
welcome, Patrick. That's exciting.
Patrick joined NVTA as an associate program planner. Patrick has spent the last 15 years working with nonprofit organizations and public agencies, which included his position as Napa County's as executive director of Napa County Bicycle Coalition for 6 years. Patrick has a broad background in local government policy, land use planning, and transportation. Most recently employed as a planner at RSA, a Napa engineering firm that Director Gregory might be familiar with. Patrick is finishing his bachelor's degree in environmental studies, geography, and planning at Sonoma State University. And he resides in Napa with his wife and a 4-year-old son. And so we just want to welcome Patrick to the team. Valerie Walston, NVTA's marketing and information specialist, resigned in early October to pursue a position with the city of Vallejo. So we will hopefully have a new person in that position within the next couple of months. And then finally, the city of Napa is holding a Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead event on November 4th from 3 to 8 p.m. at Veterans Park, and NVTA staff will be tabling at that event to promote the Vine and the Commute program. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions on that report? Not seeing any. Great. Do we have a Caltrans update? Not sure if our Caltrans representative is here.
She is, one moment.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm facing an issue of activating the camera. Okay, so good afternoon, members of the board. Again, I'm not capable of opening my screen. This is Amani Miligi. I'm the regional project manager of Napa County, and to report Caltrans projects for the October 2023. Currently, we have 38 active projects. And starting from the project initiation report, we have one project, which is a pavement rehab in the county of Napa. In the environmental phase, we have currently active 9 projects, and to go through some which has updates. The first is the project EA4AC80. This is a pavement rehabilitation in American Canyon and County of Napa and State Route 29. This is from Solano Napa County line to the Napa River Bridge overhead, and currently is in the environmental phase, and the milestone has been shifted slightly to March 2024. The second project, which has updates with shifting of milestone, is the 0J890. This is partnering with City of Napa and NVTA for the Silverado 5-way intersection. The co-op agreement has been executed on August 28, and the RFP has been released for PED to commence with the environmental phase. Caltrans requested a 20 months time extension to extend the PED to maintain the shop funds, and also shifted the PSNE and right of way to 19 months to secure the future construction capital and support costs to fiscal year 25-26. From the design, we have 13 projects and updates on some of the highlights in yellow. The first one is 2Q610. This is a pavement rehab in State Route 29 for 6.2 miles from the Napa River Bridge to the Sierra Avenue, with a cost estimate of 23.3 million, construction capital cost, and the design development has been shifted to December 2023. Currently, the design is working on the 95 plan specifications and estimate. The second project with the update is the 2J88U, and this is scour mitigation projects for 3 bridges. And to give an update that based on discussions between Caltrans and the asset management and program advisors, Caltrans is going to proceed only with one bridge, which is the no-name Creek Bridge, as a scour mitigation. However, the other 2 bridges, Garnet Creek and Garnet Branch Bridge, will be returned back to the advanced planning to revisit and with an opportunity to replace these 2 bridges. The 100% PSNE for the no-name Creek Bridge will be targeted on next year, and with the right-of-way certification and RTL by 2025. The third project with the update is the 4J990. This is a bridge replacement to improve fish passage with an update and shift of the design development to November 23, and where Caltrans requested also 19 months time extension in order to implement the 10-year plant establishment period as per the requirement from CDFW and Regional Water Quality Board. For construction, we have 15 projects, and currently they are all moving on track. By this, I conclude my report, and I'm willing to take any comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Moni. Do we have any questions? And I don't see any questions. So thank you for that report and for all the work that Caltrans is doing.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to our presentations. We have one presentation. This is informational only. And Grant Bailey, you're going to provide us an NVTA project update.
Good afternoon, Chair Alessio, Vice Chair Joseph, and directors of the board. My name is Grant Bailey, Program Manager Engineer for NVTA, and I'll be providing a quarterly project update. Next slide, please. First project we'll talk about is the Vine Trail St. Helena to Calistoga project. A lot of progress happening up valley on this project. In August, we set 3 bridges, or all 3 bridges, on the section of the trail alignment. And earlier this month, we finalized the installation of the culverts. We have paving scheduled for Wednesday of next week, so be on the lookout for a press release or some social media, kind of sending out an advisory. There'll probably be a lot of activity with paving and deliveries of asphalt. Following the paving work, we'll be working on some guardrail installation and other safety features along the trail in an effort to get a portion of the trail open, probably the northern section of the trail open, hopefully before the end of the calendar year. There's a lot of things to work through still, but that is our goal at this time. Some of the issues and risks, wet weather season is upon us. We've already seen a little bit of the drizzle in the air, and we expect it to just get worse as we move into the colder months here. Next slide, please. Snapshot of our progress through September. We have expended 87% of our working days and issued about 50% of the total contract value. I expect the next time I report to you on this project, the working days, we're going to add some working days through a contract change order that has kind of been, it's forthcoming. And so these numbers will get a little bit closer together. And then also with paving, I expect we'll probably spend about 20% of the contract value. So slowly but surely we'll bring these numbers closer together. So next slide, please. Just a few photos. As I mentioned, we set some bridges up there in August. This is the Deconic Bridge near the Bale Grist Mill State Historic Park, going over the wetland right there. Next slide. And then here's the Dunawheel Bridge. It's actually came in two pieces. Actually, both Deconic and Dunawheel came in two pieces. This is the bridge being set on Dunawheel Vehicle Bridge and being kind of connected together. And then on the right-hand side, you see the bridge actually in place. Next slide, please. And we had an opportunity for some staff and Vine Trail Coalition members to come out and, I guess, do a viewing party of the bridge being set. I want to extend, thanks for the support from the coalition. They've been a great partner in getting this project moving forward and just continuing the Vine Trail build out. Next slide. The Fine Bus Maintenance Facility. So this project is coming along very well. Since last provided an update, we have paved all interior areas that are called to be asphalt. We've also repaved about half of Sheehy Court. I have some photos coming up here in the next few slides that show that. We're currently working on landscaping, finalizing interior and exterior finishes, bringing in some of the appliances, and then permanent power for this for our facility is scheduled no later than early December. We're actually trying to get it in late November. I understand that we should have a final date from PG&E by the end of the week. So more to come there. With the powering or bringing power to the building, we'll start the commissioning process. And so I've identified that as a risk more than an issue. But that'll really be the critical stage where we start powering up our bus lifts, HVAC systems, and kind of everything in between. I expect there probably will be some issues and some troubleshooting, but we will work through that. And I've also mentioned permanent power as a risk because it's not confirmed, but we are in PG&E's, sites right now. Next slide, please. So another snapshot of progress for the project through September. If you were paying close attention to my last update, you'll notice that the working days, working days we've expended to date have actually gone down. That's because we have issued a contract change order adding additional days for weather delays. And so kind of our working days and progress payments expent have kind of flip-flopped. We're at 9% remaining on our progress payments and 13% remaining on working days. Tracking a really healthy project here. We're looking at substantial completion, I think, November 9th. And once we bring power to the building, like I said, we'll start commissioning. And I think right now we're targeting move-in. Transit manager Rebecca Schenk has an RFP out on the street. And I think we're targeting moving in January 21st weekend or thereabout. So it's exciting. Lots happening here. You can see in the photos from July to September, major progress being made on the exterior, civil improvements. We have the driveway entrance being finalized. And then, like I said, we paved all those interior areas and the employee parking lot as well as Sheehy Court. Next slide. Here's a zoomed in view of paving pretty much, I think, the day after paving was completed. Site's looking, very good. What's missing here is, and if you looked at kind of our project view cameras, you'd see a lot of the landscaping already installed. So moving along nicely. Next slide, please. I've skipped over Salsville Junction. I will come back to it at the end of the update though. So moving into some of our projects that are in planning and design for the SR 29 American Canyon Multimodal Improvements Project. I have finalized an RFP for the environmental phase. It is in the queue. There's been a lot going on for NVTA right now as far as procurements go. So it's, no worries, it is coming out and we'll be working through environmental through the remainder of this year into 2024 and probably complete environmental in 2025, which will then allow us to move into design and right of way into 2025 and 2026. And pending finding the necessary funding, we'll start construction hopefully in 2026 as well. Next slide. And then Napa Valley Forward. So This project, as you know, is actually managed by MTC. So NVTA has been partnering with MTC to finalize an environmental document. We expect the draft environmental document will come out in the next month. We'll circulate it or MTC will circulate it for public comment. And then once we receive those public comments, we'll incorporate and finalize the document. And we're looking hopefully to have environmental acceptance early next year. We do expect that, I can't say definitively, but Rutherford will likely have a no-build preferred alternative where Oakville Crossroad is looking like we'll have a roundabout improvement at that intersection. Next slide, please. Imola Corridor Complete Streets Improvement. I think as I noted at our last update, the city of Napa has applied for the Safe Streets for All grant program, and we expect to hear back on that application in December of this year. In the meantime, we've been working with Caltrans for the project improvements on Imola in their in-state right-of-way. We've been working to finalize what a floating transit island would look like as we're planning to install 3 of those to reduce bike and bus conflicts through the corridor. Next slide, please. And then State Route 37, lots going on in this project. There are kind of multiple projects moving forward under the Resilient 37 and Congestion Relief and Flood Protection Project. Congestion relief from Sears Point to Mare Island is well underway for design. I think we're anticipating design to continue through the, 2025, and then pending receipt of funding, we will begin construction to expand from single lane to double lane in both directions through that corridor. For the flood reduction project, the draft environmental document is currently out for circulation and public comment. The project team is targeting completion or finalizing the environmental document by the end of this year so they can receive environmental clearance and then move into design. Let's see, I think Director Miller mentioned it at her last executive director update, but I guess I'll reiterate that project, the flood reduction project, received $155 million in IIJA funding. That's probably about 85% of the funding necessary to construct that project. So there's a pretty big windfall for the project, and really sets it in a good position to begin construction, I think, by 2026 or 2027, somewhere in that time frame. And then for the Resilient 37 project, the PLT project leadership team, the executive steering committee have been working with the various resource agencies to finalize, prioritization of the various sections of the long-term project. And earlier this month, the team held a prioritization workshop. We are working through, I think, the final rankings of each section, and expect we'll be making a recommendation to the policy committee on how to proceed with prioritizing each section itself. Next slide. And then kind of going back to the Sosco Junction project. So first, I want to say thanks to the board and all of our committees and Caltrans for attending and facilitating a project tour that we had a couple weeks back, very successful. It was, good to get out on site, and we actually were able to stand on the overcrossing structure, kind of a unique experience. Don't get the opportunity very often to stand where, 60-mile-an-hour traffic will soon be there. So that was fun to get out there. So I guess I don't need to mention that we recently completed the pour for that, the overcrossing structure. That's kind of the big milestone that we've recently completed. Right now, the contractor is continuing work on roundabout construction. But I will note that before roundabout construction can be fully completed, there are a series of kind of traffic switches moving traffic from the current alignment onto the new overpass. And with that traffic switch, there'll be some required lane closures coming up here. And actually in the next couple of slides, I have a little bit better explanation of that. And I'll, I guess we're seeking a little bit of board input on how to proceed there. Before we move on, the one last thing I wanted to mention here is by the end of this month, we do expect that the SR 29 southbound entrance ramp will be open. So we'll be reconnecting Sosco Junction, Sosco Ferry Road, Devlin, and to, I guess, a portion of the roundabout and providing access back to southbound 29. There still will be a detour in place for those approaching the intersection from Sosco Ferry and Devlin, trying to get onto northbound 29. You still have to go back down to airport, but progress is being made at this point. So it's good news. Go on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, there is some upcoming work that will require some lane closures in the project. And before I talk about the couple of alternatives we have on the table for the lane closures, I wanted to explain why these are necessary. And so currently, when we were standing on the overcrossing structure, I think if you may have noticed that it was significantly elevated above the existing alignment. Now to, I guess, bridge the gap between the current elevation and the new elevation, we have to do a significant buildup of the intersection of 221 and 29. That's kind of the lower right-hand bubble there. And then also to connect northbound and southbound traffic to State Route 29, we also have to perform some paving conforms from the new alignment to the existing alignment, and that's kind of that upper bubble there. And so with that, we'll go to the next slide. And Caltrans had originally planned per the contract to have 14 nights of consecutive lane closures. You still have single lane access in both directions. And, this would allow for the buildup and connection to northbound traffic over the overcrossing. But Caltrans has been working with NVTA and the contractor to find some acceleration opportunities, looked at a variety of options, and kind of the option that best balanced risk with benefits is what we're referring to as a 24-hour weekend single lane closure. And so I put together a table here that kind of weighs the advantages and risks of each one. For the 24-hour closure, it would be starting, well, actually both lane closure activities would start in December, either on the 9th or the 10th. For the 24-hour single lane closure, it would start on December 10th at 7 p.m. and end approximately 7 p.m. on Sunday. The 24-hour weekend closure combines a couple stages of work and saves approximately 10 working days and about $100,000 in contract bid items. However, there's some risks because weather could delay this activity. If we get some rain on that weekend, there's a shortage in manpower, equipment, I guess, breaks down. It could push off this work. But after reviewing the various options, Caltrans and NVTA are recommending staff are recommending the 24-hour weekend closure. But we did want to put this in front of the board to, I guess, solicit your feedback, questions, and open it up for discussion. So happy to answer any questions on the lane closure proposals or anything else on any of the other projects.
Thank you, Grant. Okay, looking for questions. Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
More of a comment as far as the two options go. Probably trying to do it in 24 hours because of the savings of time and money sounds the most appealing. And it sounds like the 14-day alternative, or the baseline 14-day, starts around the same time. So theoretically, if weather becomes an issue, you could always kind of abort and go back to the low risk scenario.
That is true. One of the things that would be lost with potential weather event would be there's a significant amount of outreach needed for the 24-hour closure. Still outreach needed for the nightly closures for 14 days, but there'd be some effort kind of, I don't want to say squandered, but lost there.
Or the messaging could be it's going to be 24 hours subject to weather. And if it's a weather problem, then it's plan B.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, thank you.
Not saying what's the projected increase in terms of traffic delays? I don't think you probably have it like a GHG inventory of what it's going to do in terms of air pollution, but have both those issues been discussed or looked at?
So for the per contract nightly closures over 14 days. The reason it was built out that way is because there's a threshold on delays that are allowed during the design process, which is 15 minutes. And so those nightly closures would have ensured that the delays were at or below 15 minutes. I actually don't have an answer for you yet because it's, like I said, there were a lot of options on the table. We were looking at actually a much more risky option, and Caltrans decided to pull that. But they came up with this other option, and we haven't had a chance to really run through all of the analysis for delays. But once I do have that information, and I hope to be in the next week, I can certainly give that to the board.
And then in terms of the difference outreach, you mentioned that in terms of advising the public. Does that differ between option 1 and option 2, the more low risk versus a little bit more risk?
Yeah, I think we'll probably, for the 24-hour closure, we would start outreach about a month in advance. So probably around the second week of November. Probably somewhere around the same time for the 14 days of closure, but it would be probably a little less aggressive as far as more notification. And with the 24-hour closures, we may be saying like try to avoid the area if possible because it's on the weekend. So
Yeah, it's a Sunday.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any questions or direction? I don't know if you're getting any direction. You had a couple questions. I think we're going to leave this into your trusted care and do what you think is best. So thank you.
thank you.
Moving on to our consent agenda items, we have 5, 1 through 5. A couple of them are actually on the Vine Trail. Looks like there's one small financial amendment there. Do we want to pull any of these consent items, or do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Joseph and a second by Pedrosa. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Moving on to our regular items, we have 6 action items, and then we end with an informational item. Item number 1 is the Mola Park and Ride construction contract budget increase. Grant, you probably should have just stayed there. It looks like you get to share this with us too.
Long time no see. Danielle said I probably should have stayed up here too. So for the Mola Park and Ride project, I think many of you are aware that this project is effectively complete. It's in operation right now. The project is in Caltrans right of way. So when we completed construction, there was a fairly robust or punch list review, considering Caltrans does own the parcel and we have a maintenance agreement with them. They had, I guess, the right to, and it's kind of their process to review all the improvements. And through that punch list, there were a number of items that were, I guess, not identified earlier on that, are not identified in design, but were still required before we could close out the contract. And as we directed our contractor to perform this work, it resulted in some additional costs beyond what we had approved for the budget. And so today I'm returning to the board requesting an additional $50,000 for the project. This will provide the funding necessary to complete all the remaining work, pay the contractor, and close the project out. That concludes my
Okay,
report.
thank you. Any questions on this item? And not, do we have any public comment? Not seeing any. Okay, do we have a motion to approve if there's no questions?
Move to approve, Garcia.
Garcia, move to approve.
Second, Joseph.
Second by Joseph. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to 11.2, which is another action item. This is our regional measure 3 priorities, and Danielle Schmitz is going to present this for us.
So good afternoon, Chair Alessio, members of the board. Danielle Schmitz here to present item 11.2. Laura is pulling up the PowerPoint, but this is the regional measure 3 project priorities. Next slide. So in the Bay Area, voters passed Regional Measure 3 in 2018 to alleviate congestion on the Bay Area toll bridges and their approaches. So it's a comprehensive suite of 35 projects totaling $4.5 billion. You can go to the next slide. The bridge tolls increased. They started in January of 1st, 2019 with a $1 increase, and they will increase over the next 6 years. So the last increase will be in January of 2025. And again, this is for the 7 state-owned toll bridges. And if you go to the next slide, there are some specific project categories that are for NVTA or of interest to NVTA. And so we wanted to bring back kind of the slate of projects back to this board who has seen them in 2018 and 2019, but understanding there has been some shift in board members. So the first is the corridor specific capital projects you will see outlined on the slide and in the table. We have $20 million for South Napa County, including Saukville Junction. We have $100 million in State Route 37 work. As mentioned earlier, we are a part of the State Route 37 Policy Board, which is made up of the 4 North Bay counties, Caltrans, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And $100 million in the greater North Bay community of the 4 North Bay counties plus Contra Costa. There's $100 million in the expenditure plan slated for those 5 counties. And then in addition, there's a $150 million pot for safe routes to transit and Bay Trail projects that we can compete for with the rest of the Bay Area. So next slide. So as mentioned in 2018 and 2019, the NVTA board did affirm our Regional Measure 3 priorities. The funding for Regional Measure 3 did start accumulating in 2019 when they increased the toll and started collecting, but it's just been sitting in an account due to litigation on Regional Measure 3. But earlier this year, the Supreme Court deferred to the lower court's decision, so it effectively dismissed the lawsuit brought on by the Howard Jarvis Association, and so the funds have started to flow now. So with the funds flowing, we decided to bring back the regional measure priorities to the board. In addition, in 2021, NVTA, this board approved submitting 2 letters of no prejudice to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for 2 projects. One was for Saukville Junction under the South SR 29 county project in Regional Measure 3, and the other was for the maintenance facility under the North Bay transit improvements. And what a letter of no prejudice allowed us to do is get started on those projects using other funding sources, and then Regional Measure 3 is going to pay us back for the expenses that we've incurred on those projects. So as you know, as Grant just provided, the maintenance facility is, 95% complete. Saukville Junction is 60% complete. So we're using other fund sources, and now Regional Measure 3 is going to pay us back. So what we can use our Regional Measure 3 funds on now is what we're providing for you today. So next slide. For the South County priorities, they're relatively staying the same as they were in 2018 and 2019. So we are going to put funding towards airport, SR 12 and Kelly Road, understanding that when Saukville Junction opens up, you're going to see a lot of that congestion basically move south on SR 29 to that intersection. In addition, we are working, as Grant just mentioned, on the corridor improvements in American Canyon. We have a RFP, a request for proposals out currently for environmental work. What we want to use the Regional Measure 3 funds for is to get that project shovel ready so we can be successful going after competitive funding, which is what we're trying to do with a lot of these projects. And then in addition, looking at improvements that can be made at Carneros, all to complement basically Saukville Junction and that whole southbound corridor. Next slide. A couple changes, as you can see outlined in red on the attachment to your item, are the North Bay transit improvements. So we have, between the time that Regional Measure 3 passed and now, we've been, proactively getting projects complete. As mentioned, the Imola Park and Ride is pretty much complete with the exception of a few punch list items. So that we took off the North Bay Transit Improvement List. We are including the TIFIA loan payback. So as mentioned, we did borrow money to get started on the maintenance facility, and we'd like to pay down a good significant portion of that debt so it does not eat into our operating dollars on an annual basis, as well as completing the maintenance facility and then really bolstering our express bus routes and our park and rides and the Napa Valley College bus stop. So that is the idea behind the North Bay Transit improvements. Next slide. And then this is the pot of funds that is not guaranteed funding that would come to Napa County. So this is funding that we would have to proactively go after. It's a competitive grant, but we've talked to a lot of the jurisdictions and really looked at what projects would align with the funding source and the regional kind of grant guidelines that were going to come down from MTC. And so this is the slate of projects that we've decided. So the Saskell Oxbow bypass, which connects to this building right here, is a safe routes to transit project, as well as building out the Vine Trail, Bay Trail connections in the county. And next slide, I think there's one more table. Yes. The State Route 37 priorities, same thing. So the State Route 37 priorities have been agreed upon by the 37 Policy Board, which is made up of the 4 North Bay counties as well as Caltrans and MTC. And it's a mix of, flood reduction projects and congestion relief projects, as well as having a certain segment of funding, pot of funding for the ultimate project, which would be raising up the whole corridor for sea level rise. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. The action before the board, again, is to just reaffirm our Regional Measure 3 priorities.
Thank you for that presentation. That's a lot of great work and exciting progress.
Yeah.
And progress to come. Do we have any questions? Yes, Director Gerge.
Thank you. There's 2 projects in the Bay Trail Safe Routes Transit list that I don't can fully picture. Maybe you could spend a minute to describe them. First would be the Saskell Gateway Transit Center to Oxbow bypass connection, and the other is the Imola Ridge to Vine Trail. Ridge Trail to Vine Trail, because there's already a class 1 there.
Yes. So the first one is the Oxbow bypass bridge, which if you look on 3rd Street right here, there's a train bridge. And you'll see people breaking the law several times a day, walking across the train bridge to try to get to Oxbow area. So the idea there, the city of Napa just put a surface parking lot right here at the train tracks. The idea there would be to, at one time we were thinking of cantilevering a bridge off the Wine Train Bridge, or just having a separate span bridge to get people from Oxbow, from 3rd Street to 1st Street with the connection to this building here. The next is the Imola Ridge to Bay Trail, Vine Trail connection. So we don't have a class 1 facility on Imola, which is part of our Imola Complete Streets plan that would connect from Skyline Park to all the way down to like Foster Road area, which would be connect both the Ridge Trail and the Vine Trail and the Bay Trail. Yeah.
Thank you. When I said that earlier, I meant there was a class 1 from the River to Ridge to the Vine Trail. That's what I meant.
Oh, right. No, but not the Imola segment that would connect both the Bay and the Ridge Trail.
Thank you.
Just a couple of points of clarification. The Bay Trail actually is aligned with the Vine Trail between American Canyon all the way up to all the way to past on Imola. It goes up to Imola, then hangs a left on Imola. That's all the Bay Trail. So that would make us eligible for seeking those funds. The other clarification I wanted to make on the Oxbow Bridge crossing is the connection between what's a pretty active pedestrian area at Oxbow and the connection to the Saskell Gateway Transit Center, plus all of the development that the city of Napa is planning there, right? Where there's going to be hotel, there's going to be apartments. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a better access point. Walking on Saskell is not very appealing, as many of you know. So that would be a huge connection to also to downtown, because you could use the bypass then from that point when you get to Oxbow to get to downtown. So I just wanted to make that very clear to everybody.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the potential of what that Oxbow Bridge can provide, because we definitely need it. Director Pedrosa?
Thank you, Chair Lezio. And Danielle, thank you for the presentation. You know, I do support everything that you outlined. In particular, I think, these projects specifically focused around American Canyon, South County. I think those are so vital. Anyone that's come up or tried to go south and they see the congestion that we have in that region, it's incredible, especially when you couple it with the amount of housing that American Canyon is building. I think it only stresses the issue that we're going to have a bigger problem. So I think those investments are significant. I would be interested in kind of getting a broader presentation on the suite of projects, the timing, what funding sources, how are we going to prioritize? Because there's still a pretty big delta. And it's easy to get excited about these projects, but then it's a question of how do we fund them? And for those of us that were around when we did Regional Measure 3, we all had to come together and acknowledge that we were not going to get in. If you put in $1, you weren't always going to get $1 back. But it was acknowledging that if you put in $1, your region was going to do better. And I still subscribe to that adage in terms of supporting some of these projects in South County. But I think given us the magnitude of the benefit and the timing, I think would serve our, I was just going to say commission our authority well, just to get briefed on that. So, but thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, Director Doring.
Thank you. I just have a process question. Is there a list of what didn't make it onto the staff report in terms of recommendations? I'm just kind of curious from a policy making point, from my perspective. It's always nice to see, well, what didn't make it to the list? What other competing projects were discussed at the staff level that didn't make the sort of requirements to be recommended?
So if you look at so a lot of this is prescriptive in the funding available and the expenditure plan of Regional Measure 3. So the Regional Measure 3 specifically calls out State Route 29 from Carneros to American Canyon border, including Saskell Junction for that specific. And then for the North Bay transit improvements, in the attachment, you'll see the shift, like where we took some projects off. Imola, for instance, was closed. So we brought these back in 2018 and 2019 to this board, and from that project list to what we presented today, the changes are highlighted in red. So there hasn't been too many changes. A lot of it is just because of where projects are in the pipeline as far as being developed.
Understood. For example, the Napa Valley College bus stop was one project that was added. I understand. But were there other projects that were contemplated that were not added anywhere that would be on your mind right now? Or is there a list of those projects that did not make it?
No, I think that those are the projects that, I mean, and maybe this is to Director Pedrosa's point, but we have a large list of capital projects, NVTA does. And trying to fit those projects to the funding available is a constant game we're playing internally as staff. So for the transit projects, this is really the funding source. Regional Measure 3 is really oriented around reducing congestion on the toll approaches and toll bridges. So we had to orient it to express bus kind of projects, regional transit system projects. So that's where you see the Redwood Park and Ride, the Imola Park and Ride, and the Napa Valley College stop. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let's see. I thought I had one more person. Oh, yes, Dr. Joseph, Vice Chair Amin.
Mostly just to kind of reaffirm that these are, as you mentioned, these have been the priorities for a number of years. So for my purposes, I'm still good with it. And in particular, the American Canyon SR 29 project, as you indicated, that 12 million is going to get us to the next two steps of design and hopefully right away acquisition so that it will be shovel ready. And to Director Pedrosa's point, when you're shovel ready, you've just, it's usually when you're shovel ready, funding finds you. It's
Yes.
never that easy, but a shovel ready project is always more appealing than a great idea.
That's an interesting perspective, Director Joseph.
It's
It's very difficult for us to seek grant funding, and it's becoming more and more that way. Since I started in this industry, we went from having really significantly big grant, block grants that could have been very much like that to everything being competitive. And it really is a lot of heavy lifting. And the only reason I'm saying this out loud is because my staff works so hard to get this funding. And I want to make sure that you're aware of it and that the members of the public are aware of how hard they work to meet the needs of the public.
They just
that's
make it look
understood.
easy.
And I apologize if I'm making light of it, but it's kind of a relative thing. Without being shovel ready, you can kind of kiss it goodbye, but being shovel ready,
Yeah.
it's in my mind, there's a shot when you're shovel ready. You're
Yeah,
just a pipe
I
dream
would say
without
that's
that.
correct. Using Sasko Junction as a example, the reason we were so successful in getting such a large chunk of discretionary funding for such a small county, shovel ready, environmentally cleared, and we brought a lot of funding to the table of our own.
And that's kind of the context.
Yeah.
I admit
And
I.
hours
provided it.
and hours of advocacy. In addition to really completing some very difficult applications. Yes.
Yeah.
Understood. So, but I won't belabor the point. I appreciate what you're doing. And I'm just excited because I can see this project that is so critical is kind of lining itself up. And in my head, all the gates are turning in the right direction. Doesn't mean that it's a piece of cake. It just means it's going to happen more likely than not.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
through the thoughtful action and approach of staff,
Mhm.
knowing how to achieve the most with what we can. I don't see any other comments or questions. So in that case, do we have a motion to approve the updated regional measure 3 project priorities?
I'll make that motion since
Oh,
I'm-
public comment. Thank you. Do we have
Okay.
public comment? None? Okay, thank you. Now I can ask for a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And we have a motion by Joseph, a second by Pedrosa. All in favor, say aye. Okay, that's it unanimously. Everyone's in favor. Thank you, Danielle. Moving on to 11.3, this is another action item. The countywide Vision Zero adoption. We know how important this is and how hard Diane Meehan has been working on this. Look forward to hearing the report.
Good afternoon, Chair Alessio, members of the board, Diana Meehan. This is item 11.3. As Chair Alessio mentioned, this is the adoption of the countywide or the Napa Valley Vision Zero plan, as we call it. I have here with me today, Erin Ferguson. She's a principal with Fair and Peers, been working with us all along the way on this project. You can go to the next slide, please, Laura. And I hope that many of you have had the opportunity to take a look at the plan. We've made some improvements since the first draft iteration. What's inside the plan is the vision and goal statement, backgrounds, safe systems approach. And I do want to remind you what, for those of you, and I think that you've all heard me talk about Vision Zero enough to know that this effort does seek to eliminate roadway fatalities and severe injuries for all roadway users. In Napa Valley by 2030. That's the goal. 0 is the number. And moving forward, we hope to get there through a series of what we've included in this plan. Next slide, please. This is sort of the level of process. We started with a series of data gathering that started in October of last year is when we kicked this off. Series of profiles and countermeasures. We put the draft out for review back in August, and we are here at the adoption point today. Next slide, please. This is this is our vision and goal statement, is that Napa Valley is committed to an equity-focused, data-driven effort to eliminate traffic deaths and severe injuries on our streets by 2030. And I'm going to pass this off to Erin. She's going to talk to you about in a little more detail about what's in the plan, and she'll hand it back to me, and I'll talk about what our next steps are.
All right, thank you. So we wanted to just review at a high level what the safe system approach is. So this is an evolution for the transportation industry as a whole to be thinking about roadway safety through a safe system approach. And at the core of that approach are these 6 foundational principles. The first is being that death and serious injury is unacceptable in our public roadways. And so that's connects to, or is the connection to Vision Zero. Another is an acknowledgement that humans make mistakes, and they make them while they're driving cars or riding bikes or walking along a street or trying to cross a street. An acknowledgement that humans are vulnerable. So in and of ourselves, we can be hurt, we can be injured. An acknowledgement that responsibility is shared. So both in terms of the people, road users themselves that are out moving around on our public roads, but also the agencies who are responsible for designing, operating, maintaining those roadways, the manufacturers who create the vehicles that we might travel in and use. So responsibility is shared across different disciplines. Safety is proactive. So as an industry, we continue to strive to make improvements to prevent serious or fatal injuries from occurring altogether. So not just reacting to tragic events, but making proactive improvements. And that redundancy in the system is crucial. So we have safe vehicles that people travel in, but we also have safer roadways for people to travel on. So thinking about kind of the holistic view of the transportation system and making improvements that reduce risk in multiple ways. Next slide. As part of this plan's development, we started by wanting to make sure we first understood all of the existing and recently completed planning efforts that have already happened and touched various communities across the region. And so this is the list of the plans and whatnot that we looked at, including there are 3 member agencies who've already created local road safety plans. And so making sure that those that what we create for the region is consistent with those as well. Next slide. We looked at collision data that was reported, injury collision data that was reported from 2015 through the end of 2021. So when we started this effort last October, through the end of 2021 was the most current complete collision data that was accessible. And we looked at collision data considering modes, the severity of the collision outcomes. And so what we were looking at were all collisions that reported in anything from a minor injury through the most severe outcome being a fatality. And what we're showing here on the slide, that map is one of the kind of outcomes of our analysis. So kind of the greenish blue lines there are the streets that define what we call the high injury network. And so that's looking at the locations across the roadway network where you've had the most severe collision outcomes specific to that time period that we looked at. Next slide. We also, when you look through the plan, share a number of graphs and statistics that try to describe the types of collisions that have happened over that time period. So this is one high level look. We're on the left here, we're showing all reported injury collisions. So that would be the white bars there over 1 year to the next. And then on the right, the yellow is showing the number of collisions that resulted in a severe injury or a fatality. So some fluctuation over the years, certainly seeing the influence of some of the travel pattern changes in 2020 and 2021 to some extent for total collisions. We're really seeing kind of similar levels of variation with respect to the more severe collision outcomes. Next slide. We also looked at how the collisions impact or different modes of travel. So again, on the left, the ring is showing all injury collisions over the time period. The white part of the ring is reflecting that 89% of those collisions involved vehicles, either striking other vehicles or hit objects. Kind of the blue-green color is showing that 6% involved people biking, and the golden is 5% involving people walking. On the right is similar information, slightly different. There we're looking at the percentage and the kind of breakdown specific to collisions that have resulted in a severe injury or a fatality. And so there you see an increase in terms of the percent of people involved who were walking or biking, which is what we would unfortunately expect, given that people walking or biking aren't afforded the protection of traveling in a vehicle. So they are more vulnerable when collisions do occur. Next slide. As part of developing the plan, there's several different ways in which we sought input and engaged the community. So in addition to in-person community events or updates to various committees and so forth, we also had a project website. Then part of that website was an opportunity for people to participate in an attitudinal survey about safety. We asked a variety of questions, provided it in both English and Spanish, and so we kind of highlight some of the responses here and more in the plan itself, but really striving to bring awareness to people about certain issues with road safety, kind of some of the initial questions being or statements that people could agree or strongly agree with, et cetera, for things like, I support the goal of eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries, which vast majority either strongly agreed or agreed with. And then other statements trying to help get at an understanding of people's openness to different types of maybe countermeasures or changes in their own behavior to promote safety. And so some of those other questions asked things like, or had statements, things like intersection changes that reduce the possibility of crashes should be prioritized. So that and other input helped kind of inform and set a foundation for some of the planned content. Next slide. A few other examples of the types of questions we asked. So another one was essentially asking about speed limits in the context of where there might be children or those who are elderly present, and kind of level of agreement from the community around reducing the posted speed limit to slower. Next slide. As we worked with the collision data, an important piece of these Vision Zero plans is to be able to help think through and prioritize what are the kind of the primary topics or issues at hand that can be focused on with countermeasures or other strategies that are going to have the most positive impact on reducing collisions. And so to identify those, we talk about them as profiles or emphasis areas. And so in analyzing the collision data, we identified these 10 profiles of emphasis. The kind of 1 through 5 really focus on issues that touch communities across the region. And 1 through 5 are really issues that impact motorists as well as people walking and biking. So those 5 are consistently cross-cutting in their need and in their emphasis. Numbers 6 through 8 there focus more on vulnerabilities that we see for people walking or biking. And then 9 and 10 are profiles of emphasis specific to some of the smaller communities within the region that we pulled out. So for each of these profiles in the plan itself, we describe a little bit more about kind of the collisions. We provide maps of where collisions associated which with each of these emphasis areas have occurred. And then we also identify candidate countermeasures that can be used to help reduce collisions associated with these emphasis areas. Next slide. So this is an example of how with each emphasis area, we sought to kind of pair the engineering countermeasures. And then as an appendix to the plan itself, there's a full countermeasure toolbox. So again, kind of acknowledging that what specific improvements can be made at any given location is going to depend on a variety of different things specific to the context of the location, but also funding available and so on and so forth. So we provided a comprehensive appendix to provide a range of countermeasures that cover a range of costs from low cost to higher cost that can be used to help improve road safety for all users. Next slide. In addition to the engineering countermeasures, the plan includes some other additional strategies. So again, thinking about that redundancy is crucial element of the safe system approach. Also identified things like enforcement strategies, changes in policies, and opportunities for changes in maintenance, or how we can enhance routine maintenance to help also improve road safety performance. Next slide. Within the plan, we wanted to illustrate and provide some examples of how the various countermeasures could be considered or thought about for some of the locations, specifically on the high injury network. And so we identified these representative projects. Many of the kind of the intent behind the representative projects was also to have a range of different geographies across the region represented as well. Next slide. So I'll walk through a couple of slides here to give a sense of at a high level kind of how we move from thinking about the collision data and the emphasis areas to getting to a representative project. And so this is an example from Main Street. Yep, perfect. So looking at the collision data for this location, as well as looking at the characteristics for the location of those previous 10 collision profiles, we identified a number that are relevant in this case to this location. So things like frequency and severity of broadside collisions, history of nighttime collisions, history of couple different kinds of pedestrian collisions, as well as just conflicts and collisions along a state highway serving as a main street. Next slide. And so within each of these collision profiles, thinking and looking at kind of the next level of detail, kind of what are those contributing factors that increases risk for a collision to happen. And so, for example, we'll just look at the top one, broadside collisions. So kind of looking for and seeing a pattern of minor roadways intersecting with the bigger roadways, often where there's simply a stop sign on the side street. Sight distances could be potentially challenging, thinking about the speed differential, things like that. So kind of for each of these emphasis areas, identifying some of those more specific contextual details that can that we want to try to address when we begin to identify potential countermeasures. Next slide. And so kind of as we progress to the representative project, we looked at, in this case, along the corridor, Main Street from Pratt Avenue to Charter Oak Avenue, kind of corridor wide, identifying potential improvements for signal improvements, as well as pedestrian enhancements, which included things like upgrading sidewalks, as well as looking for enhancements for pedestrian crossings to improve visibility and so forth. Next slide. So I'm going to pass it back to Diana to speak more to the next steps.
So, thanks, Erin. So, this is just really the first step. I know that this seems like the final step in this process, but this is really just the beginning. And so before, as we had moved towards adoption with the plan, NVTA is looking towards institutionalizing these safety practices identified in the plan. So once we adopt, we'll be moving towards assembling a group. The next slide, please, Laura. Sorry. We'll be looking to working with our member agencies to continue the support and work that we started with the plan throughout the plan process. That means assembling a working group that will likely meet quarterly. We haven't identified who will participate in that group, but it'll likely be similar to the group that we assembled before. We had 2 working groups throughout this process. The stakeholder working group was made up of some of the members of our board here, along with other community stakeholders and advocates. We also had a technical advisory working group made up of local law enforcement, public health, and also some school district staff and law enforcement staff. So we'll be looking to reassemble a similar group moving forward to continue this work as we approach the as we move towards zero. 2030 is just around the corner. So there is something and you go to the next slide, please, Laura. I do want to point out that in the resolution, there is a typo before we move towards the adoption stage. It's in the second paragraph where it says traffic collisions, serious injuries due to traffic collisions is 19%, not 18% of all collisions for bikes and peds. So there is a 1% difference in there that I just grabbed that today, and I want you to be aware of that before I ask you what I'm about to ask, which is to approve this plan today through adoption of resolution 23.4 or 23-4. This is to adopt the plan and adopt this resolution approving Vision Zero, countywide Vision Zero, and reduction of local roadway fatalities and severe injuries by 2030. We're happy to answer any questions. We can go back through slides. We also have some other slides in here that might help clarify some of the data if you have questions like that.
Thank you very much for that excellent presentation. I want to first thank you both and your team and congratulate you both. You've done an exceptional job from what I can tell and what I've heard from the city of Napa staff. High commendations go in terms of this project and the involvement that the city of Napa has had with this. So this is a very good moment. Are there any comments or questions from the board? If not, we'll go to public comment. Yes, Director Eisenberg, and then we'll go to Director Joseph.
Thank you. First, I just say I'm so pleased that this is being done. And while this is Vision Zero's may not affect what happened with the recent bicycle tragedy, the idea of saying there will be no more deaths is highly appealing, and we need to set high goals like that. This is a comment, not a question. And I also would like to say I appreciate that the representative projects ran the entire length of Napa Valley.
Thank you. Very good comment. Yes, Vice Chair Joseph.
Yes, I also want to thank staff and the consultants, because over the process there was, at least I think 3 meetings with the stakeholders, and I don't know how many with the others. So just having to deal with all those humans as well as do the analysis is certainly worthy of a thank you. So thank you. And I think this is all a good document. The only concern I have is a policy level, as I think I mentioned at one of the last meetings. There are trade-offs here. The implication of a Vision Zero strategy is that things will be done to not facilitate traffic, and as we also talk about traffic relief and congestion, that becomes 2 competing elements that, sometimes the safest option isn't the fastest option. And I remember in American Canyon, when we began doing some bulb outs or whatever they're officially called, there was a whole lot of pushback saying, you know, how dumb this is because now I can't slide through the intersection quickly. It was like, yes, that's actually the point. So some of this is going to be an educational process that says, contrary to the idea that everything we do is to speed up traffic, this is actually intended to slow down traffic and reduce collisions. And so I guess it's just a, you know, as we present this to the community, we need to make sure that, you know, there's an actual policy intent that is slightly different from what everybody in a car is thinking. That will be a challenge, let alone, you know, actually physically making all these improvements. But I appreciate the report. I think you're right. It looked at the entire valley. It will be ambitious, but it's better to try for zero collisions and serious injuries and fatalities than to just shrug your shoulders and say stuff happens. So thank you.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I just want to say, I think that, you know, having zero in mind in terms of serious risk and fatalities is where we need to have our mindset at. You know,
I think
period.
It's the number that there was a video I think I shared early on when I first talked about Vision Zero back as far as 2016, maybe before. And it was done up in Portland, and they asked the community there, you know, about roadway fatalities and injuries, and gave them a number. This is the number. What do you think we should reduce that by? And almost everyone threw out a number. And then they reframed the question and said, what about if it was your family? And the number was zero. So the number really is zero.
Exactly. You know, I was looking at, you know, in your presentation, you showed the serious injury and fatalities over the last 7 years. And I believe that number was like 571. And so I divided that by 7. I'm up here with my calculator. I'm like, that's 82 lives that either have been, that are, you know, seriously injured or they're no longer with us over 7 years. That seems extremely high. And then the overall collisions that we have, we know in the sentiment, at least to the city of Napa, that this is a priority, that safe roads and slowing down, you know, speeds is really important to people. We also know in the city of Napa, just, you know, the injuries that occur around sidewalks, either just inside or outside. So your data obviously is on point. What was impressive to me was the percentage of under your survey of behavioral change. How many people are willing to change behavior based on the experiences and how dangerous our streets have become. So we have a lot of good work to do. And moving forward and being able to create some measurable outcomes, will we be able to provide a annual or biannual or some kind of annual report to the public?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. Fair Peers will be working on creating a data tool. It'll be a data platform that we'll have on our website where we'll be able to track progress over time and have that data, so that's in progress right now. That's the last piece of our contract for this project. Yeah, is to create that tool and have it available.
I look forward to seeing that data and, you know, and on an annual basis, so we can bring this back to see how we're doing as a collective group and getting down to zero. So thank you. Do we, without any other comments or questions, do we have a motion to adopt this?
So moved, Eisenberg.
Second.
Oh, excuse me, public comment. Thank you. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting our public comment. I don't see anybody here, but we need to ask. And nobody online? Okay, very good. So we have a motion by Eisenberg and a second by, was it Doring?
Yeah, and I assume that's with the edit to the resolution.
Yes, with the edit to the resolution. Thank you to the 19. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 11.4, as I said before, is an action item, approval of revised passenger code of conduct. We are in the times that we need to address these issues. Rebecca, you'll be presenting this.
Thank you, Chair Alicio, members of the board. My name is Rebecca Schenk, and I'm the program manager for public transit here at NVTA. What we're asking you for today is the NVTA board is to approve revisions to Chapter 9, the NVTA Policies, Practices, and Procedures Manual to update Section 9.2 Passenger Code of Conduct. And so to give you a little background, about 4 years ago, this month, NVTA was for the first time kind of adopted Section 9.2.1, which is suspendable offenses. Prior to that, there was kind of a passenger code of conduct, but no real enforcement mechanism. So the original, what I'm calling the existing code of conduct and suspendable offenses is attachment 2, which is your existing. It's kind of pretty brief there. And then attachment 1 is the updated one that we're proposing today. Sometimes when we're updating something, it'll be pretty minor and we'll do it in track changes, but this is kind of a relatively large full scale look at it. So you'll see the full thing. Track changes got kind of way too busy. So with that, there was a lot of discussion when we first adopted the suspendable policy 4 years ago, and I expect there to continue to be discussion on this today. And so to update this, we meet with the small operators often. So in the Bay Area, and we used particular models that they have for their code of conduct and suspendable offenses, specifically Santa Rosa City Bus and LAFTA over there in Livermore, that we thought made a lot of sense to us, and that kind of informed the decisions we made. And they've been kind of operating with these policies for some time, so it's like they took them for a trial run. I also want to take this moment to thank Dexter Cypress, who's one of our new transportation planners, for his research and his work on the first draft of this. So he really took a deep dive and appreciate that time. So what we're recommending is really kind of further amendments to clarify the code of conduct and to improve enforcement. So under our current guidelines, it was basically set up that riding was a privilege and the following were the offenses, right? So physical abuse or physical injury to another rider, driver, or transit staff member, or purposeful destruction of vandalism of Vine property. So those were basically the offenses. And then our current policy for temporary suspension was basically as follows for violating one of those two things. So there was kind of a first violation, which would have been a verbal warning, a second violation, which would have resulted in a written warning, and then a third violation or more could result in a suspension of service for a minimum of 30 days. So 30 days and up. And so what we're looking to do here is put a little bit more definition and a little bit more detail into the code of conduct, things that we consider basic courtesies. We also made some changes to improve the section as it relates to service animals and incorporating the latest American with Disabilities Act definition. And then on the kind of the second phase of, okay, the suspendable offenses, we outlined the suspendable offenses that give NVTA the right to suspend service for a definite or indefinite period of time to individuals who violate the code of conduct or engage in any criminal activity prohibited by the California Penal Code. And so most of the things in the code of conduct, wear appropriate clothing or discouraging eating, things like that are pretty straightforward. We did add some detail as it relates to electric bicycles on buses, similar to other bicycles there to go on the bicycle rack, and then added some clarity basically based upon the types of bicycle racks that we have and their weight, height, and size limitations to make that clear, because that comes up as a conflict that we have more often than say we had before electric bicycles took off. And then we did list some prohibited behaviors that had not been listed before. One is illegal or illicit substances, weapons, and then any criminal conduct prohibited by the California Penal Code is kind of a catch-all. Then we add basically section 9.21A, which includes, kind of the basic things like smoking and littering, but then emphasizes really the enforcement and how that would go. So it kind of looks at it in two ways. One, kind of like the bus driver or the road supervisor that may be kind of on the vehicle and addressing it at that time by bringing it up to the driver or bringing it up to the rider, I should say, about what's happening. Ask them to kind of cease that conduct. And then there's a section that kind of defines, okay, what NVTA here is this kind of administrative staff, how they handle things after a violation occurs in the field and it's kind of reported up the chain, right? So that's the issuing of a warning letter or notification, letting people notifying local law enforcement agencies to pursue legal or administrative remedy if that's needed, or really deciding if no further action is needed, right? Because something could happen on the bus where maybe someone's trying to bring an alcoholic beverage on, driver says you can't bring an alcoholic beverage onto the vehicle. They dispose of it prior to getting on the vehicle, end of story, right? NVTA takes no further action. So it kind of looks at, runs the gamut there, everything from reporting to a law enforcement agency to no further action being required. There is an appeals process outlined here that basically appeals to be considered by the executive director and the residing chair of the Napa Valley Transportation Board, and then a joint decision would be made maintaining or potentially removing the ban within 10 days of receipt. To give this some context, so we've had this policy in place for 4 years now. We have used it essentially 3 times, right? Once where it kind of, well, I should say 3 times beyond the verbal, because, you know, that might happen on a daily basis. But once when it was written, and then twice where there was a suspension. So this is not something that's happening to us on a day-to-day basis. It's not something that we're really pursuing, so to speak, but it's when something comes to us. And this was more like on this 3rd incident where, okay, it didn't really fit very well within our existing parameters, kind of inspired us to think a little bit more about this broadly as kind of trying to be proactive on it and deal with it. And we're seeing what other transit agencies maybe are dealing with, and then trying to figure out, okay, if we're in that position, how would we deal with that? And I guess with that, I'll open it up for discussion.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Any questions? Yes, Director Doring.
Thank you. So have you given some thought to the impact on folks who happen to have a disability and a behavior is manifested as a result of the disability itself that some of us may feel is unbecoming, but it's stemming from a disability that probably rarely happens. And I would hope that folks have an understanding of that, and that would not be something that is necessarily a violation of a code of conduct. Are thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a particular instance that we have had. I can think of things where like, oh, that person's acting, you know, in a way that maybe we get a complaint about it. And oftentimes it's someone that we know, and we just kind of reinforce the idea that it's not a threat, right? This is a behavior that they have, they exhibit, but they're not going to essentially bother you, right? In some manner. So, I mean, I think we kind of think of it there. It does give us a lot of discretion on that topic. And I don't know if Osmond, you have any other thoughts on that about how we could codify that in some way besides just giving us some discretion.
If it got to the level of where a driver or someone reported something that ended up being a behavioral issue. And I think the appeal process would allow that individual or their representative to present that information and it to be evaluated at that point. So.
Okay. I mean, as a lawyer, I see that highly problematic, but I'll defer to our counsel. I'm not the counsel, but right. I just would want us to be at least mindful of it. I assume we are. I assume bus drivers have enough discretion to understand that there are folks who have disabilities who may have utterances or things that are somewhat bothersome, and we just need to be cognizant of those kinds of situations. The other, switching gears completely, but the dress code issue, as it's stated here, it says wear appropriate clothing that covers the body, including shirts, pants, and shoes. Again, as a lawyer, I find that language highly problematic, and I don't know if it's intended to be that exclusive to that kind of dress code. I don't know if like sandals falls within shoes, shorts fall within pants, skirts are eliminated. So I think we need to do a little bit more work there to make sure we're as inclusive as possible, but also understanding that there's a certain decorum that we expect on buses. So that language may, I would say, need a little bit more work, but I understand the point of having some kind of sense of decorum, and everybody's thinks differently about what that is. But comments about that particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're trying to get at, right, is that, I don't know, basically on some basic level, not have indecent exposure, where people have pants on and that makes, you know what I mean, other people, uncomfortable. if
Or
they
skirts
wouldn't.
or something else, of course.
Right,
okay.
some covering, from, I don't know, say essentially, around the waist and, what's been deemed, I guess, private areas. I don't know what the proper legal term would be, but I think that's, I mean, basically what we're trying to get at with that and to have the body, to have that portions of the body covered. And this is not something, yes, that has, kind of come up to date in terms of shoes, right? I mean, oftentimes people might have tattered shoes or something along those lines. We're not out there, you know what I mean, trying to do that. I've bought a few people's shoes just randomly, you know what I mean, that we see, but not something that we're trying to get them to prevent wearing transit, but we could, take a look at that language.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that observation. Yes, Director Eisenberg.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the bicycle limitations. So the way I read it, there are no limitations on a standard non-electric bicycle.
Well, there are limitations in that we have not found, I guess, generally, in terms of bikes on buses, that we've had issues with, say, non-electric bicycles and them, one, exceeding the weight of 55 pounds. And then the wheel dimensions does tend to fall into that 44 inches. We do say something along the lines of excluding tandem and recumbent bikes. And I guess we could also put to that in terms of bikes and buses, not only electric buses, but or under electric bikes, but above. So really it just has come as a matter of what we've had issues with, and we haven't had issues with non-electric bicycles exceeding those weights and sizes thus far.
Okay, and just so I understand what you, the way I read it right now, it says that there's limited wheel sizes of 20 to 29 inches, excluding except for tandems and recumbents. Am I misreading it? Or
No, you're reading it correctly.
So a tandem and recumbent, in this case, it's on electric, but if you smoothed up, could have different wheel sizes.
I see. In terms of, okay, right. And then you could say it wouldn't fit. I think it was trying to say that you can't put a bicycle on that's those size, and then a tandem and or recumbent bike could also not fit within that wheelbase. So we can work on the language there.
Because some of us recumbent bicyclists don't want to be scared away from the bus.
Oh, well, recumbent bicycles though can't fit on the bike rack. So we would be potentially, you know what I mean, scaring them away, because the bike racks that are standard issue and they have to apply, work within the California Vehicle Code, don't allow for the recumbent bike because we can't get it on the
So
bicycle
you do
rack.
not allow a recumbent
Correct.
bicycle on the bike rack on the buses?
Correct, because it cannot be secured on the bicycle rack on the bus.
Okay, so just so you know, I would really like you to figure out a way where recumbents could be secured properly.
We might have to take that up a few other levels to the state vehicle code, but we will see, because whenever we buy the racks, they have to fit with that. I can look with Diana because she's more familiar with those, if there's something we can do on that front. But thus far, we have bought kind of the largest Sports Works, in this case, bicycle rack that fits the 3 bicycles and that has the highest weight limit that's available. So we are trying to accommodate the most bicycles possible.
So just one last thing, wouldn't it be best to have limited dimensions rather than talk that can be secured, rather than talking about a specific design of bicycle like a recumbent?
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's
then,
right.
Because recumbents come in all different sizes also.
That if you had a 2-wheeled recumbent potentially, and that fit within these dimensions, that it could still be okay. Okay.
Just so, not all recumbents are tricycles. Matter of fact, a minority are tricycles.
Got it.
Thank you for that. You know, what I'm hearing is a little bit more clarity to create a little bit more inclusion where we can. So I think these are really good comments. Are there any other comments or questions? Rebecca, with that wordsmithing that, that's been requested, do you want to work on that more and bring this back, or do we want to,
Yeah.
what would be the best?
I think my initial thought, and I think when the prior transit manager had brought this back, that it was a two visit deal, and that we would come back. The language would be as a consent item with showing the changes as it relates to bicycles and clothing. And then if we have any other further discussion, that would be shown specifically in track changes. And then if we're in agreement with that, it would be a consent item. If not, it could move from consent to a regular item if we wanted to further discuss maybe the bicycle definition or something along those lines. Does that seem reasonable?
That sounds great.
Okay.
Quick question it's a little out of scope, but tied to it. The training that drivers go through in terms of diffusing, situation stressful, or, somebody's having a behavioral mental health issue. There's training for drivers to be able to manage it and diffuse that. Is that correct?
Sure. Right. As part of before they're out on the road, say, and then we address these different things kind of at monthly safety meetings throughout the year that each have a different topic. That's kind of one of the major topics that we address each year. And in terms of once this is adopted, and maybe if we're on that path, we would start it now, but this is something where we've got to educate drivers about kind of the new policies that we're looking at, make sure they're aware of them, make sure they're aware kind of the appeals process thereafter and what would happen after they reported it. And then we would advertise this to the public, and probably in the beginning of 24 start, enforcing this on a larger scale. So there would be some education leading up to. It's not as though, let's just say you passed it today or passed it on November the 15th, that it would be effective the following day. We'd need to get the word out to our staff in particular, and then to riders as well.
And that is true also with DEI training.
Mhm.
Great. Yeah, I assume so. And then in case of an extreme emergency, they just call 911.
Yes.
Okay.
And they have basically a button on our CAT AVL system that they can push, and then it doesn't make any noise necessarily,
Doesn't
but kind of goes directly to dispatch and 911. So that's one way they can handle it too if they're in a situation. They can also actually change their head sign so that it says to call 911 if there was something happening on the bus and they thought that was
Yeah.
maybe the quickest way to deal with it. So we do have a couple of different ways. And then if they're on the radio calling in to dispatch, if they are able to verbalize it and explain, the overall situation. Like if it's not something where they're being threatened, but maybe something else is happening further back on the bus, or even just someone has a medical emergency for that matter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much for this. We appreciate your work and effort on this. And thank you for everybody's comments. Okay, so I think we're all set. So we'll see it come back on the consent calendar in the future. Thank you. Moving on to 11.5 as an action item. This is a purchase of 8 40-foot zero emission battery electric buses. And Rebecca, you're going to help us with this, pages 270 through 285.
Perfect. So I'm thanking Fair and Pierce for the background. I get bored with using the same one. So we'll use the same one as Vision Zero for this one. So the action before you today, as Chair Licio mentioned, is the purchase of 8 40-foot ZEBs. But what I wanted to touch on too is terms of these new purchases and kind of the state of the fleet. So you'll see on the next slide, what we're first going to talk about is the electric vehicle kind of key performance indicators. So, when Vision Zero came up and you asked, okay, well, there'll be a report on this, each year, how are we doing relative? Well, this is our version of that on the electric vehicles. So when we purchased the electric vehicles, we contracted with the Center for Transportation and the Environment, which is like a 501c3 out of Atlanta, Georgia, to kind of help us establish some modeling exercises so we knew what vehicles to use on what routes, and then to come back basically for a 6-month period and do these key performance indicators with us. So this will really focus on our 5 BYD buses. And then we'll go into the purchasing of these 8 new electric vehicles. And then we're going to talk about the overall fleet condition and a need for some additional vehicles as well. So with that, kind of the first metric you'll see here in terms of the key performance indicators, and sorry, one more slide, I forgot about the header. What it's showing you is our daily mileage, right? And this is in July and August of 2023. Kind of the key thing is the more mileage, the lighter the green, basically. And we're moving from July on your left to August on your right. So 300 bus was out of service for that time with a wheelchair ramp issue that was under warranty. It's since been fixed, but so it doesn't show up in our mileage here. 301 and 302, really when we changed our fixed routes back in August, and that led to a dramatic increase in their mileage as we were starting to use them on a daily basis. And then 303 and 304 were consistently deployed for on-demand service, and just due basically the geography of St. Helena and Yountville, right, their daily mileage is not particularly high. So what does this mean really from an efficiency standpoint? So on the next slide, what you see is efficiency as it's relate to kilowatt hours per mile. So we had kind of modeled this, and we did a little better than we were thinking on the modeling. So basically that's 1.51 kilowatt hours that we're using for every mile. There's some variation within the buses depending on the day, who's driving it, what's the temperature, how many times did they stop, how long are they idling, et cetera. But it's very kind of minor differences, and we don't have any buses sticking out for being inefficient. So that's good for our overall battery usage and our bus performance so far. On the next slide, what you'll see is a fuel cost per mile. And so it's a little deceiving, a couple things here. So when we do the reports moving forward, I've talked to them about having biodiesel and diesel combined really as one category, because that description really only has to do with Napa Valley Petroleum's availability of biodiesel. That shifts and it's very erratic. So we're going to have diesel and biodiesel together, but it doesn't really change the message here about this is our fuel costs per mile. It's higher on the CNGs, but right now that's not really a product of how many miles per gallon, so to speak, that they get, but really a factor of there are quite high CNG prices. We're paying close to $5.80 per gallon right now for liquid natural gas, when we had paid maybe $2.97 in the middle of COVID. So they're having a high price right now. And then we've got our BYDs and our Proterras. So in terms of fuel costs, I mean, when I think about what this all means in terms of operating costs, we should be fairly consistent in terms of the fuel cost of electricity and diesel moving forward, with electricity just slightly higher as we stand now. And CNG just sort of represents 4 vehicles in our fleet. And in a way, it's kind of nice because other times when diesel's high and CNG's low, it can also help us out. And so on the next page, what you'll see is our maintenance costs per mile, right? And what you'll see here is kind of interesting in that, well, first off, our Proterras are showing up extremely kind of high, especially since they're new vehicles, but that doesn't tell the whole story, because why they're high on a per mile basis is we did, knowing that the Proterra had filed for bankruptcy in this period, buy as many parts as humanly possible that we thought we would need in the next few years. So we basically bought ahead. We might not need said headlight replacement, right? But we have that headlight replacement in case we need it. So that kind of is not indicative maybe of the costs that were actually used by maintenance at that time. Our BYD costs were a little bit higher than our diesel costs in terms of our maintenance thus far. And then our CNG costs were quite high. As I mentioned, we have those 4 CNG vehicles, and they're all kind of at a phase. If you think about it, when you get your 120,000 mile checkup or something on your vehicle, it's kind of a big time whenever it's like, all right, we got to rebuild the engine. We need to do a lot of different maintenance. And so all those vehicles are kind of on that time frame. So I don't expect them moving forward to be a big issue. There are a couple other things that we're looking at in terms of our key performance indicators, and I'll bring them back over time. But I think the bottom line is that when the electric vehicles are out there, and as we've been using them more since August 14th, we've been pretty happy with their performance and their efficiency, and their fuel costs aren't that far off from our fuel costs on the diesel side of things. And so the action that we're going to be asking you to take today, and you'll see on the next slide, is the purchase of 8 new electric vehicles. And we'll be buying from a new provider. So as you know, we own 5 BYD buses and we own 2 Proterra buses. So this is federal money, so we're not allowed to buy BYD buses currently. And we can't buy Proterra buses because of the bankruptcy proceedings and they're not taking new orders. So we had to look for someone else. The California state list just has 3 people, BYD, Proterra, and then New Flyer. And NVTA, if you were on the board, in the maybe 2014, 15 through 18 timeframe, we did have some New Flyer hybrid electric buses that we used for storage. And so it's a little bit of a bad word. In the maintenance department, we retired all of those vehicles early. We just would rather not enter into that. So we're looking to buy these vehicles off the state of Washington list. Marin Transit recently bought off the state of Virginia list, and Contra Costa bought off the Washington list. So this isn't unprecedented by any means. And the federal funds we can use on that. We do have to do an amendment to our grant agreement, but FTA has at least agreed in theory, and then we have to execute that. So that would happen after this. But back to the why Gillig. So there have been manufacturing buses and manufacturing in general for over 100 years. Both NVTA and Transdev had a lot of success with those vehicles. We actually operate 2 Gillig vehicles right now, our oldest being 2003. So 20 years old, the useful life on these things is 12 years. So it gives you a sense of they're quite the workhorses. They have a plant is over in Livermore, so it makes it easy for QA, QC visits. And then delivery is pretty simple. You just charge the bus in Livermore and drive it up. And then this is their second generation of electric vehicles. Gillig was a little later than some of the others, which is probably one of the reasons they're not on the California list. They weren't into their second generation yet, but these second generation buses performed well at the Altoona testing, which is what the Federal Transit Administration does. So we're feeling pretty confident in these vehicles and this company and its ability to stay in business. In terms of the funding for these 8 electric vehicles, on the next slide, you'll see that it's mainly federal funding in terms of we were awarded the bus and bus facilities grant at the basically 7.9 million. Then we round that out with TDA, state vouchers, the HVIP vouchers, and then a PG&E rebate because we were participating in this Fleet Ready program through that. And so that's kind of, I guess, the good news on the funding front. And when we think it's a good quality product, kind of on the downside, it will take us from the point where we execute the purchase order. They're telling us that it'll be 24 months before we would get these buses. And it's not as though New Flyer had any better prediction. My only hope is that if you remember last month, we approved the bus chargers. Those chargers are to arrive on Friday and will be installed and commissioned. So my hope is that others don't have the infrastructure in place. They'll move themselves down in the Gillig order and we might be able to move ourselves up because we'll have the infrastructure in place. We'll see how it plays out, but the bottom line, we're not going to get these tomorrow. So then the final thing I wanted to touch on was just kind of the overall fleet condition. So, we've been talking a lot about, and these are the same categories that we saw before. But one thing I really want to emphasize is we're still, in terms of the mileage and what we put out there every day, right? Very much a diesel fleet. We just have those 4 CNG vehicles and then the 7 in total electric vehicles. So that's what we are putting out there on a day-to-day basis. And each day that we're waiting for, say, these Gilligs to come, or if the Proterras, that was about a 2-year period, and the BYDs was about a 4-year period in terms of, because they had to do some testing and then actually get us the vehicles. Our other vehicles are aging. So you'll see on the next slide, it basically shows, okay, the number of vehicles that are at the end of their useful life. So that means in terms of one of the longer buses, 35, 40 foot, 12 years, and then like a paratransit vehicle, 7 years. So right now we have 24 vehicles right past their useful life, and we won't have any other new vehicles delivered this year. Then in 2024, and those 4 vehicles we approved last month at the board to buy basically 2 Calistoga shuttle replacements and 2 VineGo vehicles. So then that kind of brings us down to 21 vehicles, right, that are beyond their useful life. So we're gaining ground. But then you'll see the 8 Gilligs that we would approve today would have probably arrived at the beginning of 2026. But what happens is vehicles that we bought in 2013, right, will suddenly be past their 12-year useful life. So we'll go from having maybe 25 vehicles past their useful life to having 40, right? So these vehicles are aging faster than the electric vehicle market is able to produce new vehicles for us. And for the industry in general, I mean, I was actually down in Oakland today going through some training with so many of the other providers, both large and small. So what is Samtrans, for example, doing to address this? They've decided they're redefining useful life at 18 years because they're not going to be able to do it at 12. What's Contra Costa doing about it? They're going to, before the deadline to not purchase non-electric or non-ZEB vehicles, they're putting in like huge orders right now. So I don't know that I want to do necessarily either of those things. We do have some future pending items. So for example, we have another 5310 application where we might get 4 to 6 paratransit vehicles. But as I want to start the conversation, and we're not taking any action on this today, but about getting some used vehicles into our fleet as kind of our stopgap, right? For these years 24, 25, 26, while we're waiting for other vehicles to come. So for example, if we got a used CNG vehicle that's 6 years old, right? We'd get another 6 years out of it, while electric buses and other, if we would go a hydrogen route, would have the opportunity to increase production, and we'd have the ability to raise additional funds. Because in some ways, it's not even a funding thing, it's just strictly a production item. And there are less people in the market with BYD and Proterra out of the bus market for federal funding. And Gillig only kind of ramping up, and New Flyer also just ramping up. So I think they'll get there, but it's just not helping me on a day-to-day basis. And kind of what's happening on a day-to-day basis, if you see on the next slide, we had missed trips, right? And so this is looking back basically during COVID. And so in July of 2021, through kind of the spike in the summer of 22, we would have a lot of staffing issues, and we would have missed trips as a result. I mean, we've been in the right direction now with really low missed trips throughout 2023. But what we're seeing is an increase like in the August and September timeframe, when we had like 39 missed trips in September, 27 of them were maintenance. So my issue is switching from, okay, I have enough drivers, or at least a reasonable number. I could always use a few more if you knew someone interested, but changing more to the mechanical side of things as our fleet ages. And so what I don't want to see is that, you know what I mean, continue to go up. So trying to think through what we can do about that. And then just from a cost perspective, on the next slide, you'll see that we had previously, in terms of bus maintenance and how we divide things with Transdev, right? We had been for years and years prior to 2019, well under $100,000 per year in terms of maintenance costs, as we maybe were able to replace our fleet. But as the fleet ages, right, we're going up and up, and then our forecast going up 24, 25, 26 kind of continues to escalate. So it's something else that we kind of need to look at. So no real action on that today, just kind of want to present that, and something that you'll see further items on in the future. So to recap, all we're looking at today is to purchase 8 Gillig electric 40-foot buses. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you for the very thorough presentation and the heads up of the conundrum that we're in with our aging fleet. Questions or comments before we bring it to public comment? Yes. Oh, I hear somebody. Vice Chair, you want to start? And then
a real quick question on the used vehicle. Is there a decent market out there? If we said buy 5 used buses, could you?
I think so. Yes, we're looking through Transdev, who's our operator. We've been looking at some other vehicles, potentially some ones from LAX, for example, that they changed. I don't know if you've been there recently, but they changed their whole circulation element. And so they have some vehicles available potentially. So that may be what we're looking at.
And those would be the diesel or CNG?
They would be that particular set is CNG, but if I found some diesel too, it might be something to look at. There aren't really used electric vehicles. There weren't ones that were produced more than say 8 to 10 years ago.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, Director.
Yes, the chart shows Gillig buses both 35 feet long and 40 feet long. Is there a difference in terms of purchase price or operational cost or maintenance cost between those two different size buses?
Not too much. With the 40-foot bus, you have just a little bit more space for batteries. And so it does give you some additional mileage. This is what we had been kind of looking for when we originally applied for the grant. So in this case, we're probably pretty locked in to the 40-foot because that's what we got approval to buy. In terms of it, so not so much really, yeah, on the maintenance cost, it has a few more seats. So like if it's a big event or something, that gives us some more options, but the turning radius isn't too different. There's not too big of a difference. We do see a big difference between like the Proteras, which are the 40 feet, and then that BYD, which is the 30 feet. So kind of that whole 10 feet in terms of like just turning radius and maneuverability, that we see a difference there, but not so much 35 to 40.
In terms of longevity of the vehicle, it's approximately equivalent.
They're all fall into that, the 35 and 40, and actually the 30-foot vehicles all fall into the heavy duty category with a 12-year useful life, because it does come into play when you get basically like 26 feet or less, and they're medium duty, that they're only good for 7 years. So it feels like you have to buy them, you know, all the time. So it's all in this 12-year category.
So you look at the purchase prices and then they're close enough. Not
They're, yeah, they're pretty marginal. It almost becomes a rounding error between 35-foot and 40 at the end of the day.
And so why would Gillig offer 35-foot buses for tight areas, small cities?
It's a
Small
little bit
streets?
better. We tend to, like, when you see a large bus in the city of Napa, it's usually the 35-foot and not the 40-foot. We tend to run the 40-foot on things like the 10, the 11, the 11X. There's not a lot of turning. It just gives you a little less bus to deal with, but price wise. And then in terms of operation, our most expensive thing is always the driver in the seat, regardless of the size of the bus.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Yes, Director Pedrosa and then Director Shuto.
Thank you for the report. It's exciting to see us go green. From the infrastructure side, you know, what plans do we have from a contingency standpoint? Say there's power shutoffs or so forth. So what's our plan around that?
Yeah, I mean, right now, our plan around that is we have a limited number of electric vehicles and we would rely on
Projection
like,
going
okay,
forward.
yeah, okay, on the diesel and CNG. So when we look at that towards the future, so right now, in terms of even when we move to the new maintenance facility, we don't have the battery backup, right? That's going to allow us to supply all of these vehicles. And so long-term, we did buy that adjacent third parcel with the idea that we could build that out for battery storage, a transportation information center, et cetera. So with the idea like, okay, that would be our battery storage area. And that's how we would kind of deal with that issue longer term. I mean, I think we'd always want to have some other vehicles as our backup, even if we wouldn't use them on a day-to-day basis, that in a pinch we had like fueled CNG and a few diesel vehicles, right, ready to go on an evacuation standpoint. But I think that's still evolving in terms of how it would look like, but at least we would have the adjacent property to deal with it as we get it, that gets more developed.
Got it. And I think as we make that transition, looking at our, you know, maintenance yard as a critical infrastructure. So when there is power shutoffs, PG&E or whatever utility company is, they're aware of where they're shutting off power, just like they are critical of hospitals or other healthcare facilities. And then also having backup generators where appropriate. I think we need to think about those type of things just to be prepared for
Yes.
natural disasters as well.
And we have like a backup generator, and we'll have power at our maintenance facility, the combination of a backup diesel generator and then having the solar panels that feed to the battery, and it can kind of alternate in between the two. There's like the switch that says, okay, the solar doesn't have any more, it switches to the diesel generator. It might do
Correct.
that and vice versa. So we'll have enough power there in terms of the physical infrastructure, but we'd be lucky if we could charge, you know, 2 buses on a good day. So it's not so far that we can do that yet, but we are thinking about just the general connection of the maintenance facility.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Shuto.
Thank you. I'm so interested in the green options and also understand the challenges. So
Sure.
what about the hydrogen buses? Because I know that we did have that as a backup to be able to use that at our
Yeah.
facility. So what are the availability of them? Are there more of those? Is that something that we can shift to instead of having to purchase the used gasoline?
Sure. No, I understand. So what action you had taken was the new maintenance facility, we made one of the bays to be hydrogen ready. So basically that there's a thermal event it contains it, and then the rest of the area does not catch on fire. But what we don't have yet is a source of hydrogen in Napa County that we have. So, I mean, our hope is that basically a private entity would come in and be the fueler, and similar to the way we pull up to get diesel or CNG. So at the point where they would, a private entity would file a building permit with this Napa County in order to put in that fueling station, that's when we would kind of move forward and try to buy a hydrogen vehicle. But until the point where we have a fuel source, we can't do that. So that's where we're standing now. And we're really relying on the private sector in terms of making that jump. And we've had conversations with the private entity looking to do that in Napa County. We're encouraging, we're basically saying, like, if you know what I mean, if you do that, we're ready, but they're not there. And we can't buy a hydrogen vehicle if we can't fuel it until we get down to Alameda County.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I thought they were there at our last meeting. I thought we had somebody identified that was going in.
Yeah, no such luck.
No.
Yeah, or I mean, there's this, but yeah, no building permit, no project. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. You know, all the counties have made a commitment to, we talk about net zero, GHG by 2030, which is again, another very ambitious goal. And this is kind of a setback, as majority, more than 50% of our GHG comes from transportation, not from us directly,
Sure.
but the cumulative. So we're always seeking ways, and thank you for finding Gillig. It sounds like that's a really good source for us, and very reputable, and you vetted it well. And we'll have to approach the fleet issues in the future. But again, I thank you for bringing that to our attention. If there's no other questions, we can go to public comment on this action item. Is there any public comment? Not seeing any. Do we have a motion to approve the purchase of the Gillig buses?
So move Chateau.
Shuto moved.
I'll second, Joseph.
Joseph second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Rebecca. We are on to 11.6, and Rebecca, you get to stay with us. This is an action item, resolution 23 to 25, amending NVTA agreement with Transdev Services, Inc.
Correct. Perfect. So again, Rebecca Schenk with the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. I'll be presenting on this second amendment to the Transdev contract. So they are our current operator. We entered into contract with them in the beginning of actually calendar year 2022. So we're just approaching the end of year 2. So you hear me refer to years like 3 through 7, which is essentially years 24 through 29. And I'm not going to go through all of the changes, but really just want to emphasize, okay, this is an action item for $3.8 million. And what constitutes that? Why do we need that money over that 4-year period? So we've broken it down into fixed costs and to operating costs. So on the fixed cost side of things, we're moving to a new facility. We have to do certain environmental reviews, spill prevention control and countermeasure plan, et cetera. So and then we have to report on that annually. So that's an additional $21,000 as we move into the new facility. So pretty minor. The next thing we're doing is we're adding 1 full-time equivalent employee that would be a bus stop technician. We currently have 1 that cleans all of them within Napa County. This would be adding a second. It would be to clean the relatively new Amola Park and Ride, to clean future Redwood Park and Ride improvements. If you remember on the RM3 item, there was Redwood Park and Ride improvements that include a new bathroom, and that's something that we'd have to maintain. And then they would be maintaining on some level all the additional square footage that would be at Sheehy Court as opposed to Jackson, and then just keeping our bus stops in general in a better condition. So we'd be going from 1 bus stop technician to 2, and the cost over 4 years, including insurance and supplies and things, is the $372,000. The next thing we'd be doing would be increasing wages just specifically for mechanics. We have 3 classes, A, B, and C. We've had vacancies in the Class A position basically for the last 2 years as we kind of continue to recruit. And when we look at it, this would be bringing us up to what's at the level would be 50% of the NAICS code, which is the ground transportation mechanics section. We'd bring it up to the 50% level in the Bay Area. So I don't think we'd be going above and beyond by any means, but just trying to make ourselves competitive for mechanics. all tying back to our aging fleet. So to pay all of our mechanics over the 4-year period, additional funding, it would be 328,000. And then other fixed costs related to hiring, insurance, about 171,000. So that gets you to roughly $900,000 in fixed costs of the 3.8 million overall amendment that we're looking at. So on the next page, want to talk about changes in operations. So it's just a quick map on your right? We're at the Saskell Gateway Transit Center. 720 Jackson Street is less than a mile up the street. So vehicles deadhead every day from there to here. And we pay the driver basically to be in the bus, right, to drive from Jackson Street to here to start the route. And then we pay them to take the bus back at the end of the day, and vice versa. If they're starting at the Redwood Park and Ride, where a lot of our vehicles, they go that approximately 3 miles there. But right now we're going to have a location in 96 and 101 Sheehy Court, further within South County. So they're going to be deadheading basically every day from that location to start routes at the Saskell Gateway Transit Center or the Redwood Park and Ride. We do think there are some options to change some of our routes, like the Route 11 that's going to American Canyon, or 11X that's going to the Vallejo Ferry, to start those routes further south and have less deadhead. But this assumes if basically, I would say worst case scenario, we can make only so many changes to the routes, right? We've got to start a City of Napa route in the City of Napa. Would need 3 additional drivers, and there'll be associated mileage, hours, and insurance costs associated with that. And that over the next 4 years, once we move in, would be roughly $1.5 million when we look at the hours. Now, just to give a little backstory, we had gone back, when we looked at sites in 2014, we identified 10 sites for a maintenance facility. None of the 10 could we acquire, right? We acquired the 11th. This is kind of as close as we could get. So it's kind of a known change, but not something that we could put in the original contract because we weren't sure when the maintenance facility would be done and the timing therein. So that's that. And then the other kind of change on the operating side, if you move to the next slide, is increases in service hours. So this would be in years basically 4 through 7. So this would be if we wanted to increase service over any of the next 4 years, this would give us funding in order to do that. We could fund up to 3 drivers and up to 5,000 additional service hours. We have no set idea on exactly what routes that would be, how, but this would give us the opportunity under this amendment to do that. So basically, if we don't do that, right, we'd be leaving about $1.5 million on the table, and we would never drive that. We would never hire the drivers, et cetera. So if we don't put on any additional service over the next 4 years, we wouldn't incur this cost and we'd spend less than this, but it does give us the option without having to go through an amendment process again to increase the total amount. So kind of overall between the fixed costs and then these operational variable costs, this is how we get to the roughly $3.98 million in total. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Vice Chair.
Just going through that summary, the 3.98 is kind of like a worst case number, that there's a good chance that it could be less.
Yes,
based on
very much so.
everything.
The only thing
Okay.
we'd really be locked into are those fixed costs that are about 900,000, and then everything else is variable thereafter.
Thank you. Good question. I'm not seeing any others. Do we have any public comment on this item? No public comment. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve in a second?
Move to approve, Garcia.
Garcia, move to approve.
Knight.
Knight will second
Second.
that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? That motion carries unanimously. Very good. So thank you, Rebecca. We are now on to our last item, and this is an informational item, federal and state legislative update by our Executive Director, Kate Miller.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair Alessio. So everybody's probably aware that the Congress finally passed a continuing resolution that will fund the government through mid-November. And in the interim of that, the Senate and House are both working on the the Housing and Urban Development appropriations. And the Senate and the House are pretty far apart. The Senate version includes $14 billion for transit formula grants, and in total is $1.49 billion. It has $800 million for rebuilding American infrastructure and sustainability equity, which is the RAISE grant, discretionary grant program, and $268 million for transit infrastructure grants. The House bill reduces the transportation funding by $5.43 billion over the 2022-23 amount. So it's really far apart and eliminates funding the RAISE program. So I don't see necessarily a budget in the near term, and probably looking at a continuing resolution. But as you know, the leadership in the House is very at flux right now. In your packet is an updated bill matrix in your handouts provided by Platinum Advisors. This is a state legislation that we're following. And I just wanted to give you a quick status update on some of those bills. AB 16 Dixon would have allowed the governor to suspend the CPI adjustment on fuel tax. This would have been a real hit. I think if that had gone through and the governor elected to do that for your local streets and roads funds, it is now a 2-year bill. There is a Senate bill from Nguyen, and that also is a 2-year bill. So that's good that did not move forward. There are a number of Brown Act bills that are moved forward. One, AB 557 Hart bill was signed into law by the governor. It effectively extends authorization for local legislative bodies to hold remote meetings under a proclaimed state of emergency. There is, let's see, there's a couple other bills that are two-year bills. The AB 817, this is would allow some subsidiary type committees to hold remote meetings. Doesn't look like it's going to move forward. And then there is the SB 411, which we were watching, which pertains only to Los Angeles, did change some Brown Act rules, but it is again specific to LA, and it uses alternative teleconferencing provisions, but it's going to sunset in January 2026. And then finally, AB 620 would have created a free youth transit fare pass pilot program, and it is also a 2-year bill. And that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions on that. Okay. So I think we can go ahead and move on to number 12, which is future agenda items. And Director Sedgley is not able to be here today, as you know, but he does have a request that I told him I would share. He would ask for your support in placing the Tulaque Creek Bridgestones discussion on a future agenda. His reasoning is that he's really wanting to preserve these stones, as we did with the First Street Bridge. He's had some discussion with Napa County Landmarks, and there's some interest there. So if we can put this on a future agenda for discussion, that would be great. Do we have support for that?
Yes, I was going to say, if you need a motion, I'd make a motion to add it.
Okay, we have a motion second. It's all in favor. I don't know if we need a motion, but I do see consensus in putting that on a future agenda item. So, okay.
So I just some clarification. I'm assuming we'd invite Caltrans to come
Yes.
speak on that because
Please.
it's outside of our jurisdiction, as you know. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I also want to thank Tom Collette for being here for the Paratransit Commission. Thank you, Tom. I saw you there and I meant to say hello, and I missed my opportunity. So I want to thank you for being here today in person. It's nice to see somebody in that chair. Yeah, wonderful. Are there any other items or otherwise? Let's go ahead and adjourn this meeting. It's 3:57. So our next regular meeting is November 15th, 2023. Thank you, everybody, especially NVTA.